right, let's get started. Okay, well, welcome everyone to our roundtable where we will be discussing how to listen and leverage voice of the customer to improve go-to-market performance. I'm your co-host, Elizabeth Italiano, and I'm a managing partner at Go-to-Market Advisors, and we are go-to-market problem solvers. We diagnose and fix go-to-market challenges. And I'll hand it over to my co-host to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Indu. I'm a managing director here at GTM Advisors, and I head up our sales practice.
Thanks, Indu. All right. Well, one quick logistic note before we get started. We'll ask everyone to please submit questions via the chat. We have everyone on mute just to avoid background noise, but we are happy to take questions via the chat and encourage discussion there as well. So we have a jam-packed hour of amazing content, and today we are going to discuss what a modern-day VoC initiative is and isn't. We'll quickly review the results of the poll that you've all seen as you've entered the roundtable, and we're also going to address a question that many of you had coming into the roundtable, which is how to operationalize VoC and how to leverage AI. So given the fact that this is top of mind for so many of you, we thought that we would actually bring this question to the forefront of today's discussion and provide some insight into the how to help set the stage for the panelist discussion. And then we will get to the main event and introduce the panelists and hand it over to them. So first, we want to share what voice of the customer is and what it isn't to get everybody on the same page. So historically, voice of the customer has been seen as an initiative that's specific to marketing or customer success. However, VoC is not just limited to these functions, and it's also not a one-time big bang initiative. So that begs the question, what is voice of the customer? Well, it's an ongoing initiative that provides an unbiased view and insight on customer and market sentiment, the key word being unbiased. It helps to improve go-to-market performance and can help companies make important decisions such as product roadmap decisions, among many other examples. So VoC captures meaningful insights into why your customers buy, why they churn, and why they grow with your company. And so in the past, VoC initiatives were also extremely time-consuming and included a lot of manual processes to get and analyze the data. And leaders would often wonder, is this juice really worth the squeeze? Unfortunately, tech and AI advancements have actually made this a lot more efficient and effective. So yeah, now it is actually worth the squeeze. So we've got a lot of questions, like I mentioned earlier, about the operational best practices for VoC and how to pull insights from this data. So we asked our data and AI practice lead, Daniel Bruce, who has a ton of experience in this area, to join the conversation and share some of his insights and best practices. So Dan, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, so like Liz said, my background is in artificial intelligence and data science, specifically focused on this topic that we're talking about today. So really how to leverage AI to pull rich insights out of customer service data. And, you know, one of the themes that we saw in the questions that were submitted is just that I think a lot of folks are thinking through kind of how to leverage AI to manage this data. And also, what are some of the common themes that are kind of run into, you know, what do companies encounter in trying to leverage that data? And we find that those challenges kind of run the gambit, you know, depending on your particular situation. But some of those themes tend to be kind of having a lack of data, where you just don't know where to start, where that data is coming from. On the other end of the spectrum, kind of drowning in data. So you have too much data. And so managing that data at scale can be challenging. On the other hand, a really common challenge is having data sort of dispersed and disseminated across a lot of different systems. And so being able to connect the dots in kind of a meaningful way to understand the voice of individual customers, but then also overarching themes of what that looks like can be challenging. And then one of the challenges that's really near and dear to my heart and to our heart here at GTMA is how to draw those rich insights out of unstructured data. So it's one thing to manage, you know, data that's very structured and numbers and charts and tables and that kind of thing, but drawing insights out of conversations and emails and text and natural language tends to be much more challenging. So that's kind of an area that we specialize in. And we'll talk more about that, today. But just by way of encouragement, I think what we're finding is that modern AI technologies like natural language processing, even chatbots, large language models, they offer really, really rich capabilities to tap into that type of data at scale in ways that even a year ago, 2 years ago, were just not technically feasible. So we're kind of at the cusp of a new generation of AI technologies that allow us to pull richer insights at a scale that really hasn't been possible in the past. So that's something we're really, really excited about. The data is, these problems are solvable. Not going to say that they're easy to solve, but they are solvable. The insights are worth the, as Liz said, the juice is worth the squeeze here. And just one theme that I think you're going to hear from a lot of our panelists today, you're going to hear it from us, is just that the best way, the companies that are leveraging this most effectively are not using technology to replace current best practices, but to augment those best practices and the people that are doing those, these customer service roles today, to kind of pull out rich insights and help that team be more effective. So we're really excited to be talking about that today. And Liz, I'll kick it back to you just to introduce the panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And just I'll add really quickly, when I think back to when I used to go through customer CSAT scores, NPS surveys, and all of the text that was in that and the manual process, it take days. And now it's something that we can do, in a matter of, well, I don't know about minutes, but a lot more quickly. So hopefully that's helpful and answers some of the questions that many of you had beforehand. So without further ado, let's get into introductions, and we will start with you, Maranda.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maranda Dziekonski. Happy to be here. I am the Senior Vice President of Customer Success for a company named Datasembly. Own everything there post-sales and dabble in the operations side as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Cari, we'll go with you next.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm Cari Levine. I manage our enterprise sales team at Pendo. I'm one of our regional vice presidents. Been at the company for 6.5 years and excited for today's conversation.
Thank you. Emerald.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emerald Maravilla. I'm a director on our America's Enterprise business at Snowflake, leading the SDR team. I've spent the last decade of my career in SDR land, so I love talking top of funnel.
Great. And then last but certainly not least, Jay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jay Nathan. I work for a company called HigherLogic. We're a customer community software platform. I've been there for about 3.5 years. Also co-founded a community called Gain, Grow, Retain, which is a customer success leadership community. And we've been doing that for almost 5 years now. So
great. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for everybody for joining us. And really excited to have experts and leaders across the go-to-market functions, because as we said, this is not just for customer success or one function. This is for go-to-market and across businesses in general. So Indu, do you want to kick off the panelist Q&A?
Yes, absolutely. So what we've seen is voice of the customer has been a very big focus over the last 2 quarters. So first question to you guys is, why do you think it's become such a big priority for teams recently? And Emerald, let's start off with you.
Yeah, so I'll challenge the context of the question a little bit, because I think voice of customer has always been a central focus for SDR. We often speak with the highest volume of the market and the market demand, so we get a good pulse on that. Now I will dive into the core of your question, which is why over the last couple of quarters. I think this is largely a response to the macroeconomics, right? People are looking for higher efficiency. Companies are looking for higher efficiency and productivity. And as the introduction well highlighted, AI has been at the center of that. So you have OpenAI, who sort of led the charge on that, but now companies are shifting to a branding where SaaS is no longer the hot buzzword on the market. Every company has to be an AI market. But in order to make AI really activate, it's got to speak for something. And I think the voice of the customer is a recognition that AI needs that voice. And it's also a nod to people and to the market to say, hey, you matter in this world.
Great response, and completely agree. The macroeconomics of what's happening today really put a big burden on leveraging voice of the customer and leveraging AI to do so. Cari, what else would you add there?
Yeah, I think I like to think about, people always say knowledge is power, but to me, data is the knowledge that allows us to be powerful in our roles. And at the end of the day, like when you have the ability to understand what your customers or your prospects are indicating to you through voice of the customer, those are your opportunity to have leading indicators to be able to be that much more impactful in your conversations, to think before they already tell you and have a perspective based on what you've seen, whether they're taking actions in your product and coming up with the hypothesis of why they're doing that. It allows you to elevate and have more actions come from those conversations. So we think of the data as it's our secret weapon. Now, how do you use it? And I think that's where this conversation is interesting from the AI perspective, because that's adding a whole nother element to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the point you made about almost anticipating what the customer needs to hear, or that sort of line of questioning, because we have more than enough data to actually start doing that today. Maranda, on the CS side of the house, what would you add there?
Yeah, so I actually come from lower volume, higher dollar value type businesses, and I also play in early stage startups, just for full context, and agree with everything that's been said here. Data is power. It is, important that you're definitely looking at the data, but I tend to marry that with the real voice of a human as well. I feel that speaks to the internal teams if they can hear from a customer. So part of my voice of customer programs, when I put them in place, is not just what does usage look like, what does CSAT, NPS, ticket volumes, ticket types, all that data is important. It does tell a story. I also try to marry in, having a monthly or regular cadence, a fireside chat with a customer where we can interview them about what's going well, what isn't going well. And I look for the most blunt, honest customer that I can find to really give us, the full company, that view. And that kind of ties it all together. I tend to see, when we are seeking efficiencies, that is the first place we cut. And I think that is a big mistake, because we think we can get enough with the data, and we probably can for a while. But if you're not getting the real voice from the customer in that voice of customer program, you're missing a big piece of the picture.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. So I think that qualitative element to things is so important. And then when you think about selling, whether it's on the pre-sales or post-sales side of the house, having that emotional connection to what the customer or prospect is saying is paramount, along with having all of that data to go with it. Last but not least, Jay, anything you would add there?
Well, I like you said the qualitative word. I actually wrote down qualitative versus quantitative for this, but even going back, AI gives us the ability to do things faster, more efficiently. And a lot of what we're talking about here is efficient. We're talking about efficiency, but why do it if it's not effective, right? And a lot of times voice of customer programs are not effective because we're not implementing what we hear. We're not turning around to the customers and telling them what we found a lot of times, right? So you find surveys aren't enough, right? Surveys have such a low response rate in most companies because they don't do the other things around it. It's not actually about the technology at all. It's about whether the company actually cares enough to truly listen and truly feed back what they heard to the customers when they're done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I won't speak for everyone here, but we've all been with companies or seen companies where that data collection process, easy breezy, we have all the data we need. But when it comes to actually executing and leveraging it to do something with that data, there's always kind of a stumbling point there. Awesome. Thank you all for your answers. I will hand it over to Liz for the next one. Oh, Liz, you're on mute.
Thanks, Indu. So our next question is around what are some scenarios where something concerning whether it was a prospect or a customer was really evident to you, but not other teams in the organization as a whole, that VoC could have helped to prevent? So Emerald, we'll start with you.
Great. So no particular anecdote comes to mind, but I'm recalling a conversation we had recently amongst our SDR leadership team here, where we're thinking about rating the qualification calls on our team. Now, what rubric we'll use to decide that is still to be determined, but one of the floating ideas is exactly this. So the experience of the customer through that qualification conversation or through that initial contact point. We often will think about effectiveness of how does this deal progress throughout the funnel and does it win us any dollars? And while that is one important metric, I really love the component and the theme of we still need humans in this AI-driven world. We still have to orient towards the customer experience. And I grew up at Twilio where we still, one of our values was start in the customer's shoes and empower others. And I love that notion of delight that still has to happen. So that's one area for top of the funnel, which I think it would be effective.
Okay, great. Thank you. Maranda, over to you.
Yeah, I as well, I don't know if I have an anecdote either. However, what I will say is, just having a deeper understanding of your customers' problem statements, what they're using your product for, can help avoid so many issues from, getting the wrong fit customer in the funnel to having to exit them if they're a wrong fit customer, which I've had to do numerous times, is not fun if it's mutually not a fit. And having a strong voice of customer program that tells you what the right fit is, what the wrong fit is, who you should be marketing to, who would be the right persona, so on and so forth. It's just crucial to the entire go-to-market motion. But no, aha moment or really juicy moment to share with you, other than it's just good practice to leverage all of this information through your funnel.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, the bad fit customers, I've been in situations where, CS teams and support would say, okay, these customers aren't a good fit, and we could point to churn numbers, as one potential source, but VoC gives the context of why, and then helps to inform that decision. So the point that was made earlier around, Jay, I think you mentioned it, qualitative and quantitative, that's what makes VoC so powerful, because it's really the marriage of both. So Cari, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think we've alluded to this, but in every part of what we're talking about, there's a human element to it. And that's so true, pre-sales and post-sales. From my perspective, in the selling motion pre-sales, like we're constantly up against competition and do nothing. And a big piece of what we're dealing with are customer asks. Hey, our competition has this, you don't have this. What we need to be able to do is listen to that, but dive deeper into the why they need it. And the piece that I'm getting to is the voice of the customer holistically in where our customers are successful allows us to take that data and go back to our pre-sales focus with an understanding of, hey, you might be thinking about needing X feature. We've had this request before. We need to think about it a different way, as this is the outcome you're trying to solve, not this is the feature you want. Another piece that I'll mention that is more anecdotal, Pendo as a product, we have a feature request capability. And so one of the things in drinking our champagne is when we do have certain feature requests, just letting customers know, hey, we've added this into our product roadmap requests. There's no commitment that this is something we're going to build, but sometimes the validation that you've heard them and you've shared that internally helps build credibility. People just want to make sure that you're listening to them. It's not just going into a black hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Two key things that I often hear a lot that you touched on, Cari, is around outcome versus feature. So what are we actually trying to achieve, as opposed to getting, hung up on a widget and a feature and that sort of thing. And then that black hole When customers feel heard, then that can go a long way in improving their sentiment, their engagement, when they know that if they're putting that effort in to engage with your organization, that it is getting read, it is getting listened and talked about, and that there's responses. So that's great. Thank you. So Jay, over to you next.
I need to make sure I'm answering the right question. I forgot what the question was, actually. I was so enthralled.
That's okay. I'll repeat it. So what are some of the scenarios where something concerning whether it was a prospect or a customer that was evident to you and maybe your team, but not the organization as a whole?
Yeah. Sorry. I think about, I watch a lot of gong calls from both my customer success team and from my sales team. And it's really interesting from where I sit to do that, because I can see where the misses happen, right? I can see where we talk past each other. I can see where we interpret something that the customer said one way, but they meant something else. And I have no control of it, of course, because I'm watching these calls after the fact. But to me, Gong is like one of the most amazing tools. It's not even that revolutionary, I guess, but to be able to go back and do that and watch these things and how our customers are interacting in their natural state, in our team in their natural state, it's like really, really powerful from my perspective. So that's the first thing I thought of when you asked for like an example, is just being able to see where that misalignment happens. And it's not just expecting feedback to come from the customer. It's actually watching an interaction, making sure that our team understands it as well. So, and then certainly if our sales team doesn't understand that, how could our product team understand it? They're another layer removed, right? They should be talking to customers as well, getting this feedback. But I think it goes back to the human element here that we keep touching on, which is, VoC programs don't have to be this huge automated thing. Like in the early days, right? Startup land, Maranda, right? It's the CEO is the voice of the customer program, and should be, right? And then as you grow and scale, you don't ever want to get too far away from getting that feedback, but you have to go do it in more scalable ways. So anyway, the Gong example is the one that came top to mind for me.
Just jump in on that Gong example. I think the value of that it's almost like a one-to-one conversation that you have the opportunity to jump in as an outsider and scale yourself into those. And then it's also an opportunity to bring in other cross-functional folks where they might need to hear it directly from the source, but we can't get them in front of that source. So it's really valuable to scale.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to what we talked about in the intro about an unbiased view. And so with things like, Gong and, watching Zoom recordings, you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth. It's not hearsay. And we all bring our own lens, and we might have happy ears sometimes, especially in sales conversations and renewals. So now we're actually getting the true picture, the true lens, as opposed to maybe rose-colored lenses in some cases. So anything else anyone would like to add to that before we move on to the next question? No?
I will say that Gong's natural language processing has gotten much better over the years as well. And so we're now able to leverage trackers to understand, hey, are our team members using the call to action that works well? When they use this phrase in the conversation, how does that lead to sales effectiveness and deal progression? I mean, that's a really fantastic coaching opportunity. It's also a really great self-awareness opportunity. And again, removing that bias, because you always hear someone on the front line say, well, I did X and I did Y, and the customer didn't respond the way that they were supposed to. But it's a really great tool.
Yeah, agreed.
And an excellent segue to our next question. So obviously a lot of us agree that Gong is a pretty key pillar of voice of the customer data and really what you can impact from it. When you think of other data sources that you might leverage for voice of the customer, what else are you using today that might be helpful for others? We'll start with you, Emerald.
I'm a sales professional who says I kneel at the altar of Salesforce. That is still true today. It is the end all and be all. And again, that's probably relevant to my role as top of the funnel. It's just the easiest data source for our SDRs to plug in information that they're hearing and for us to best categorize this. So a couple of best practices on this. I like to be prescriptive in a drop-down menu about the types of themes that we think we're going to hear from the customer, but also offer a free response text box to allow our front lines to really speak and advocate on the behalf of our customers as well. And it's easy to tie this to pipeline value, close won data, or close loss value. So then we can work cross-functionally to show where we're winning or where we're potentially losing.
Yeah, that's great. And completely echo you on the Salesforce being that source of truth. I think getting feedback from the reps and having something like a secondary resource like Gong to really correct or check what you're seeing in Salesforce against Gong really helps. Cari, is there anything you would add on there?
Yeah, I love this. Being at Pendo for years now, we use our own product on the sales team. So it allows my sellers to do a couple of things. It empowers them with key product data to understand what the likelihood is of someone that's in our free trial experience to convert and key indicators there. We also have a new product that's a session replay tool that allows us to go in and actually see where people are getting value or getting stuck. So be more efficient with our time and go in and help drive them to leverage the tool more effectively. And then we do a lot of micro in the moment surveys that are contextual to where they are in the product, as well as things like when someone shows up for their 1-year anniversary of using our tool, share a win and get the ability to celebrate some of those small wins. And then we can take that internally and kind of propel it across the organization. So 1-to-1, but then allowing us to also scale.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love the idea of micro surveys and then the user sessions, really seeing how folks are using the product. And again, drinking your own champagne is also a big validation of that. Maranda, on the post-sale side of the house, are there other data resources or sources that you're using?
Yeah, I wrote down a list of like 30, so I'm going to have to really cut it down. But this is something I'm very passionate about. So I'll mention a few that I think are really important just to be able to aggregate not just the voice of the customer, but to be able to understand what is the health of the portfolio. So I start in the beginning of measuring time to first value. It's really important that you understand how long it's taken your customer to get to that first value point. You need to make sure the value point that you're measuring isn't just an internal measurement, that it maps to what they view as value as well, and they know that they've realized that value. And then, of course, before I even get to that point, I make sure I segment by persona. I want to call that out. I work in data companies, not dissimilar to Pendo, but I serve very niche industries. I was at Swiftly for 4 years and we served public transit, and we had something like 7 unique personas that would use the products very differently. So that was really crucial that we did that segmentation. Sentiment, I do look, and I know this is very controversial these days, but I do look at NPS. It's not an end all be all. It's a data point. I pay attention to what people are saying, what the comments are, but most importantly, the people that open the survey and don't reply. I tie that back to the persona. Are they a decision maker? Are they holding the budget? Because that's important. And I find that to be very fascinating when I get that back. We look at CSAT, of course, but that's just a transaction. So are you satisfied with how your support rep handled this particular transaction? Then I go into, we use Pendo. So usage is really key. Again, breaking it out by persona. Couple things that are a little different because I do work with very large contracts. I like to measure if the customer is achieving ROI. Return on their investment. So we collect customer goals and, mutually agree on how we're going to measure those goals and have, like 6-month sprints to where we have a certain amount of time to reach a certain amount of ROI, and we measure that as part of the health. And then a couple last things, customer interviews. are they willing to be interviewed? Do they participate in interviews with product, with marketing, with, customer success, or with executives? That is a big indicator of health if they are willing to participate and also potentially co-develop your product with you. Not only does it make them feel more invested in your product, it's a big data point, and it's also helping them get their voice injected. There are other things too that I could add to this, like health score, scorecard, a bazillion things, but those are some of the things that I think are crucial.
Fantastic. And I think you hit on such an important part is when we think of voice of the customer, we often think about the words coming out of their mouths, but often cases it helps to identify what a real issue is if we're not hearing their voice and it is a persona that's critical to an opportunity moving forward or renewal or upsell. Jay, anything you would add there?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't plug customer communities as a solution to hear the voice of customer. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago up in Boston. It was a customer marketing and advocacy conference. And what I heard a lot of there is that customer marketers, the people who in theory would be running these voice of customer programs in a lot of cases, are being blocked from actually engaging with the customer by customer success teams or by the account management team or by the renewal team. And I think that's really weird. And so because multiple people need to be engaging with our customers, first of all, and multiple people need to be listening to our customers. We've talked a little bit about triangulating. I hear things differently than maybe a sales rep or my sales leader hears things versus the CS leader. So we need to be able to do that. And, customer community is more than just a support deflection tool. It's actually an engagement platform where customers should be coming. You can find folks that are rising to the top that know your product better than anybody else. They become your advocates. They will also give you tons of feedback, right? Good, bad, and ugly. They can be some of your biggest champions. So it is what I do. It's what we sell at HigherLogic. And so, yes, I'm super passionate about it, but I've seen it work in my own company and in our customers that choose to use community as a strategy to engage. It's just like a window directly into the customer. I thought you asked about tools. So I was going to mention communities, customer communities. That's one thing. But the other tool that I've used in the past, and I think Qualtrics owns it now, is a tool called Delighted. It's just the most simple, straightforward. I hope it's still simple as it was like 10 years ago when I first used it, but just a really slick, easy to use tool for gathering and analyzing customer feedback. So that's one that I always try to promote.
I can confirm it's so easy, so effective as well. It is one of my go-tos. So,
and I was also going to mention, Cari, that I was going to plug Pendo as well, like just the whole in-app experience. Because again, like we got to go to where all these people are and try to get the response rates to be higher. If we want this feedback to be statistically relevant and helpful, we just got to go get more of it from the customers. We got to engage them deeper.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned in the Slack is really interesting too, Jay, of the people we need to be concerned with are the ones that we can't get to engage with us. And so that's, I think, also where the power of some of the Gong recordings and going back historically, where we need to be able to figure out what changed, right? If at some point they clearly were engaged with us, they came on board as a customer for a reason, where did things shift? And so it's an interesting idea. And then the other piece I'll mention, like the customer community, like as those grow, everything in an organization starts to shift and change. They're so powerful.
Yeah. They're great sources of information. And also I love when I see customers helping customers too. And you're really fostering a sense of community amongst your customers. And really quickly before we move on, Maranda, you mentioned about time to value. And from a tactical perspective, one of the aspects of voice of the customer that I found really helpful for that is identifying what time to value is for each of your stakeholders. So time to value for a frontline rep, say using Gong, is going to be different than what time to value is for a frontline manager and to an executive. And voice of the customer really helps to align on what those things are. So when you said time to value, I'm like, yes, it's one of my favorite use cases for taking customer data and starting to understand that. And of course, talk directly to your customers to find out what those things are. So we'll move on to the next question. So the next one is really around your respective roles. So when you think about the roles that you have now, maybe the roles you've had in the past, how do you recommend people leverage voice of the customer data to help achieve their targets or carry out their respective roles? So we'll flip this a little bit and we'll go to Jay, you first this time.
So how do we use voice of customer as individuals to improve? Is that sort of the gist of the question?
Yeah, it's basically to carry out your roles and hit your targets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you believe that everything starts and ends with the customer and their perception of what it is you're trying to sell them and how you're trying to take them through the process, then it's sort of a no-brainer. I think, the people who can benefit most, probably most immediately from this is like a sales team, who can better understand the personas and not just how they use our product, but the things that are going on in their world outside of our products, because that's often where adoption issues and ROI issues become real, is things that are outside of our control that we don't even know about, right? Lack of resources or integrations that are more complex to get in place because you have dated systems. It could be any number of things. So I think that's an obvious place. And then on the customer success side of things as well, I mean, customer success managers have the opportunity to get closer to the customer than probably anybody else in the organization. They're trusted a lot of times. They're a helpful hand. And, I think we could serve them better and they could serve the organization better just by training them on how to dig a little bit and find out some of that stuff that's going on outside of our product. So I think there's just two areas that I see relative to the question there.
Yeah, I love that. Understanding the workflow, not just how they use your product, but what their workflow is in their day-to-day is really key. So Miranda, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I immediately started thinking about green space analysis when you asked this. So especially in this economy, there's a lot more pressure on the customer success organization to be tied to revenue somehow, and to be able to prove value that they bring to the table. If we know our customers well and we go deep, kind of how Jay described, we should know the problems that they're solving across, their organization that we could help them with, either with their current investment or with maybe investment in a different area in our product, right? So first and foremost is, I think the teams could and should do a green space analysis and understand what could potentially be a good fit that is not currently an investment, and then really double down on what I call the value cycle, and building out a value partnership. I want to, again, preface this by saying I work with larger contract values where the unit economics make sense for us to do this, to have this close of a partnership and not leverage technology all the time to drive these interactions. So when I'm thinking of value cycle, it's, what was your reasoning for purchasing this product? How are we going to partner with you to get you to value and solve this problem? What are the probing questions we need to ask to surface the next set of problems? And then we do it again and again and again. And it just naturally builds that trusting relationship and helps you get into other areas. It sounds simple, but it's a pretty complex motion when you put it into play. But this is what I think folks need to be doing, leveraging the voice of the customer information to tell them naturally where they should go and maybe where they shouldn't be thinking about expansion, but thinking about getting the customers to a healthier state so they could get to that part of a deeper investment.
Yeah, love it. I love the term value cycle as well. Completely agree. So Cari, we'll go over to you next.
Yeah, I think Miranda hit a lot of the key points of how to leverage this from a big picture standpoint. One other thing that I think having a voice of the customer program allows us to do is all of our organizations change constantly, right? There's a lot of people change. There's a lot of reorg and segmentation and things of that just consistently make who customers are interacting with at our companies shift. And so having the data, having recordings of conversations, having the historical background allows new people to really get up to speed before having to put the onus back on the customer and say, hey, it's been 3 months, here's someone new for you, here's another 3 months, someone new, and start from square one. So I think that's the power of this, allowing the company to still iterate fast and put the customer at the center of everything we're doing with all of that important information that we have.
Love it, putting the customer at the center. Very well said. Emerald, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so going back to the question, how do we leverage voice of the customer to help the reps on our team hit their targets? Without fail, SDRs always think excellence looks like feature dumps and knowing the product and its features and mapping one-to-one, a feature to a persona. And that is not the way to get someone excited. And I do believe our responsibility is to create awareness, education, and excitement in our prospects so that we can set them up for successful journeys where they're able to intake the value of a partnership with our business early on. So I'm working on this metaphor in my brain right now, so forgive me if it doesn't fit correctly, but they're almost smoke detectors in a way, right? We should be able to help our prospects understand that there's smoke in their house and that there are a number of ways for them to solve it. But those ways are specific to someone's experience level and familiarity with the different tools. And so we're also supposed to help them understand, should you use a fire extinguisher? Should you use a hose? Should you use the top of a pan? Should you use a fire blanket for this? And we can help direct them to that. And so I want our SDRs to listen to the voice of the customer to understand how those customers have become heroes in their organizations and really help connect the dots between the problem or the smoke that the SDR is laying down as a potential issue for their business, but also how we can partner hand in hand with them to make that individual a hero. And this is something I've learned working with Indu in the past. You really have to get down to that emotional level. And like we've said a number of times here, if you don't understand the personal and professional motivations of the customer, you can't do that successfully. So that's where I think our SDRs can really up-level their game and hit company targets and individual targets as well.
Yeah, that emotional aspect is key. And when you can get to that level and you know their motivations and their fears, that can be really powerful. And I've always, told my team and then my clients, don't make our product, our service, the hero. It is about what the customer has been able to achieve. They just happen to be leveraging our product. So anything else anyone would add to that before we move on to the next question? No? Okay. Indu, back to you.
All right. So a little bit deeper continuation of that last question. Understanding how you all have used voice of the customer data to really target opportunities. So on the new business side of the house, how do you use voice of the customer data to really understand what opportunities to target for new business? And then for post-sales, renewals, upsells, how is voice of the customer data really helping you narrow your focus on who you should work on? So let's kick off with Jay first.
Well, I mean, the most powerful thing for me over the past, I'd say, year with sort of processing voice of the customer information as I interact with customers directly is knowing which use cases are the most sticky use cases that we have for our product with them. It makes a huge difference in our world, and I'm sure in many of y'all's worlds it does as well. If you have customers using your product in style A, they're going to be they're going to retain longer. They're going to be way more productive than if they use it in style B or C. And so that's been really helpful for us, is just getting clear on what those standard use cases are. And then you can align talk tracks to those, right? It becomes pretty easy if you know what the customer's trying to accomplish. You're mapping a use case to it and you have very clear talk tracks for how your product works in that scenario. Then I think it's easier to enable our sales team with that rather than just have them go in and say, okay, like, what are you trying to accomplish? It's much more prescriptive. We could be more prescriptive. And I'll just add that that's really important, especially in a vertical SaaS business where you're selling to a particular industry. You should know that industry better than anybody because you get to interact with dozens of companies that are in that industry, even more so than people in that industry, right? Because they probably don't interact with as many different companies as you do. So you get the opportunity to really build some depth there. Even if you sell a horizontal product, a product that can do a lot of different things, you probably have prevalent industries that you serve and you can go deeper there. So I think, voice of customer is really helpful in helping to define what those segments are and then go build your use cases around them.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to the earlier point of anticipating what the need is going to be, being versed in what those use cases are, not only helps you sort of move faster with the prospect or the customer, but also builds so much credibility coming to them and stating it versus waiting for them to let you know. Maranda, what would you add there?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You have more to add?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, like, it's really important to use the customer's words back to them, right? So that's the key is you're taking all this information in, like what words are the customers using? What problems do they have? And are you training your teams how to communicate back to them in that same way? So to your point, you build credibility really fast when you talk in specificity like that. Yeah. Sorry, Maria, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. It's a good point. And just to kind of double click a little bit into what Jay said, build a maturity matrix off from this information, right? If you don't, especially if you're in a vertical SaaS where you specialize, like I usually do, don't get me wrong, at HelloSign, this would have been a little bit harder because we served, so many different industries. But if you are where you are catering to a certain industry, having a maturity matrix that shows them that folks like them, when they implement this, this, and this, it moves them up the maturity scale. You can take the information that you get from your voice of customer program alongside with the relationships you've built with all the key players and understand, what the impact of your product is as they, implement certain features, functionality, change, all of that stuff, and help them move up the maturity model.
Absolutely. And then in that process, you're positioning yourself really as the expert. So it's not just...
Exactly. That's key. Yeah. That is really key. That's very key in vertical SaaS, to be quite frank. You want them to view you as a partner and not a vendor. If they view you as a vendor, you are 100% going to be battling for your line item on that budget all the time. If they view you as a partner, it is a little harder for them to cut you because you've proven your value and they view you as somebody who's adding value to their business regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. Cari, anything you would add on that front?
I think just in terms of like taking the words that they opportunistically give you and using it as a way to dig deeper is important and also help you on the sales side. Like we're always talking about how do we get higher in an opportunity earlier? How do we unpack the real business pain that we're trying to solve? And the value comes in the words that they give you and listening. And then to Maranda and Jay's point, like regurgitating what you heard and layering further and further. And so I think with all of the like technology that we have, that is the opportunity in front of us to take prior discussions, layer in, go deeper. And then for my team specifically, how we use VoC from a data perspective as well is trying to be effective with our time. So Pendo we have a free model and then we do paid trials. So trying to understand where to focus on when customers are ready to have true sales-led engagements versus being more in the educational sales process. And so we use those key indicators as a way to judge where to engage.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so much of the market is very PLG based today. So having actual usage determine when we're interacting, whether they're at the free level or actively in a trial and ready to upsell, is a huge help with those sales conversations. Emerald, anything else you would add there?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a different perspective than the vertical SaaS lenses that we've used to typically answer this question. So, having worked at Plaid and Twilio previously, those were developer and entrepreneurial tools where our focus at the time, so these were really early days at both organizations, was simply to get our building blocks in the hands of builders and see what they could do with it. And 90% of the time, they did what use cases we prescribed and knew about. But the real fun was that 10% of the time where someone would come to you and say, hey, I want to build a financial product for newly immigrated individuals who want to build out the thickness of their credit portfolio. And we were like, oh, we've never really seen anybody do that before. This is cool. And so we take that feedback, we take those conversations and try to quantify that to help inform our product roadmap and our go-to-market strategy for an opportunity like that. And I think that was a really interesting way to use these conversations, as disparate or, infrequent as they were, when we started to feel like they were trending, or when the data started to show us they were trending. It was really great opportunity to then, to what Jay said earlier, go back to the market, reach out back to these customers and say, hey, 6 months ago when you said this, we heard you. And now we've put something together for you and like-minded individuals. And then we also would say, who else do you know that we should go and talk to about this? Who else would be interested in this as well? So I had a lot of fun doing it from an emerging product standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those edge cases really tell you a lot, especially when you are in emerging markets. Anything else from the panel here before we move on to the next question?
Okay.
All right, I'll hand it over to Liz.
Yeah, so this will probably be the last question we get to, just doing a quick time check. Can't believe how fast this has gone. But one of the questions that we often get, and has been one of the ones through the attendees as well, is what do you think is the biggest economic impact voice of the customer can have on a company? So Jay, we'll start with you.
Well, it can help you sell more software if that's what you're trying to do, or sell more of whatever product you're trying to sell. And ultimately, I think that's it. I mean, the other side is retention, right? If you understand your customers better, you can cater programs and processes and product toward them, and they're gonna be more successful. I won't say happier, because I don't think the goal is happy customers. I think it's successful customers. And so voice of customer programs certainly can influence those two big things.
Yeah, absolutely. And successful doesn't always equal happy. So it's a great point. Maranda, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Jay already took all the brilliant ideas. So I'm gonna just say can also help you efficiently and effectively figure out your product roadmap. Especially in times where you have a lot of pressure from your board to be profitable, spend less, do more. Grow efficiently, which is a new thing we're hearing all the time now. That I think making sure you're not building stuff that's just sexy and fun and doesn't drive really revenue. You're building stuff that actually is going to solve true problems and innovate in your industry. It's so crucial.
Yeah, I agree there. Cari, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on that note, I think it's like the cost of building the wrong things and the tech debt associated with it. Obviously, increasing ACV on my side of the world is critical, and winning deals and sales efficiency. So VoC allows us to be empowered with that. And then basic things like reducing support tickets, making sure that you're streamlining kind of the motion cross-functionally.
Yeah, that's a good point with the reducing support tickets, reducing that cost to serve. That's something I've heard more this year than I've had in previous years. So Emerald, what are your thoughts?
I'll just add pipeline. So potential opportunities for the future and growth opportunities for the company.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Are there any final comments or anything else anyone would like to add as we wrap up today in the last few minutes? No? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. You've been amazing panelists, and really appreciate the generosity with your time, as well as you all sharing your expertise. And we do have one more roundtable to go in 2023. And in that roundtable, we're going to be discussing what not to do. So mistakes from 2023 and what we learned and how not to repeat them in 2024. We're going to be joined by Mark Strauss, who is the CEO of Proof Analytics. If you are not following him on LinkedIn, you will want to. His posts are prolific. The research he does on macroeconomic conditions and how that affects a performance is nothing short of amazing. He's really generous with the information that he shares. We will also be joined by Bridget Harris, who is the CEO and co-founder of You Can Book Me. She has successfully started and led a bootstrap company in a very competitive market. And given the constraints that we're seeing in the economy, her expertise and experience is going to be really valuable to learn from going into 2024. And last but not least, we have Spencer Pyland. He's the CFO and COO of FreightWaves. He's also held roles within the company as CRO, CPO, in addition to his current roles. So he has a perspective that you're not going to want to miss from holding all of those roles and what not to do and what to do going into 2024. So the link is in the chat if you would like to register. Again, thank you so much to the panelists today and to everyone that came. All of the questions that we did not get to from the attendees, we will answer and respond to in posts. So follow us and make sure we will cover all of those great questions that you submitted. So thanks again. Appreciate everybody's time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.